This week we're talking about diligence. Most of us probably like the idea of diligence. The practice of diligence isn't so easy. It may be helpful to reflect on the way that it's really a person's habits that come to define their identity over time. So, for example, if you were to describe for me your mother or your father or whoever raised you and what they were like, you would probably define them in terms of their habits. You might say, well, mom was always saying such and such. Every time I think of dad, dad was always out doing such and such, right? So our habits come to play a pretty significant role in defining who we are. And so it's valuable to be diligent, to be active in selecting what kind of person we're trying to be, fixing our mind on that and taking steps that will move us in that direction. In the first sermon on this Proverbs series that I've been preaching through, I referenced a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. That book for me has just been a really, really helpful read, very practical. One of the stories that he talks about as he's talking about the power of habits, the power of diligence, really. He talks about one extremely successful salesperson who got great recognition, moved up the ranks in their company. But their method was not that they were more clever than the others in how they went about making sales or talking about their products or anything like that. Their method was they just had a little container of 150 paper clips on their desk. I believe the number was 150. And every day they got to the office and their goal was, I want to try to make 150 phone calls to sell this product that I'm working on selling. And so they would begin and they would take a paper clip and they would make one phone call, whether it was a successful sale or whether someone hung up on them. That meant they could move one paper clip from that container over to the next container. And they would continue in that course of action until hopefully at the end of the day, there were no paper clips left. And then the next day, they began again. Being diligent in that behavior brought them great success just by the sheer amount of effort going into what they were doing. You may have some things in your life that function that way. I don't know your occupation or your vocation, what it is that your role is. I was reflecting on that model and thinking about myself. And of course, we're talking a lot about virtue and trying to grow as people. So for myself, I've made kind of a modified version of that same process that I'm trying to utilize. By the nature of what I do, I don't really have a repetitive task like those kinds of phone calls that I need to make in large quantities. But it is the case that there are certain tasks that it would be helpful if I were to do them pretty regularly. So I had this idea. I'm going to show you a gadget that I came up with. But I purchased a game of Guess Who, the classic board game. I thought it looked kind of hokey if I left it red or blue. So I spray painted it black. And I printed off a series of little cards that had objectives, things that I wanted to try and do every single week. And so for me, as a proactive way of trying to be diligent in accomplishing certain things, I've got one of these at home and then also one of these at the office with different tasks for each place. But every Sunday morning, I'm on my way to my home office to practice my sermon and get ready for class and for worship. But along the way, I always grab this thing and I flip it upside down and kind of do a refresh on it. I have a few at the back I'm not using. And then, during the course of the week, I have certain goals and I try to do these things every week. And as I do them, I'll get to check them off. And it's kind of gratifying to do that. A couple of ways that kind of process is useful. There are certain things that by allowing myself one, it helps limit me. If I had my way, about the only thing I would ever do is read books. And so I have something on here where, for this week I'm going to read a book. But I made an agreement with myself that I'm not allowed to pick up a second book until I finish all the other items on my list of things to do this week. So I get to do one book and maybe I'll do it really quick and early in the week, but I don't continue it until I have completed some of the other things I had in mind to do. And on the flip side of that, there are some things I just don't ever feel like I'm in the mood to do, but by putting them on that checklist, I am a little more proactive in trying to get them down. So this week, I know with our devotional reflection, this is a little more tools and pragmatism, but maybe there's some thing in there you could grab onto and utilize for yourself. But diligence is making big changes in small increments, persisting in something that's valuable a little bit at a time, again and again and again. But over time, that's how mountains are moved, right? It's just a little piece at a time. It makes such a difference.